Gibraltar has a long history of land reclamation. Ever since the growth of the population exceeded a few thousand families, buildings started to rise up the western slopes of the rock. But they could only go so far. It was much more logical to expand seawards and build on flat land reclaimed from the sea. The most notable reclamation projects in recent history have been the South Mole and Dockyard, the North Mole, and of course the airport during World War II. Well, all of those noble projects were to be eclipsed 50 years later by a massive reclamation program. Land reclamation within the harbour waters has always been an ongoing process, and more so since the 50s. It's not difficult to imagine that HMS Rook, the naval grounds, Coaling Island, the Varelbeg Estate and other smaller areas of the Rock's western shoreline have all been reclaimed from the sea. This process took time, and the new government needed to act quickly if Gibraltar's social and economic development was not to be hampered by a shortage of land on which to build.
Gibraltar has very clear and distinct constraints by way of its size, and land is a must for any form of development, including social development. Gibraltar has suffered in the past through scarcity of land for housing purposes. More recently, we are encountering difficulties in that we are developing land of a sloping nature, which is making it very expensive for the government to build housing economically. And that the option that has now been taken is one of reclamation, with the sole purpose of providing flat land which will become economical to build houses on. People in Gibraltar are only conscious of the buildings that there are around Gibraltar, but they are unaware as to the high density within the homes. i.e. Gibraltar finds itself with houses occupied by 2 and very often 3 families, which is a very unsatisfactory social situation.
For years, military considerations have weighed heavily against equitable land distribution in Gibraltar, and the progress in tipping the scales the other way has been painfully slow. But both the past and present administrations have been resolute in pressing the need for more land.
The scenario that we were faced with was, in fact, that the land holdings in Gibraltar were literally distributed in an imbalanced situation. Whilst it was 50-50, and which was, in our opinion, not an equitable situation, the fact was that the MOD land holdings, their 50%, was literally flat land, whilst our 50% was restricted to the town area and, of course, the upper town area. Now, both sectors of our land holdings is restrictive in terms of mass development, because the mobilization cost and the problems associated with building in that sort of situation are very high cost effective. And therefore, if you look at the situation we inherited and why we decided to go for land reclamation, you will see that there was no other answer.
Opting for land reclamation on a large scale was clearly one answer, but pursuing the release of MOD land was another. So the present administration also made this a priority. The urgent need for new housing was the main thrust in all negotiations.
This definitely reinforces the Gibraltar's need to reclaim land. i.e. Gibraltar has developed from a social aspect, cultural, business-like in many fields, but it has suffered to keep pace with its development in the field of housing. Housing occupies a lot of space for people to live in, and it is a very apparent social problem.
With housing at the top of the priority list, the land reclamation program would provide a huge area of flat developable land for construction and investment, thereby generating economic growth for Gibraltar. Enlarging the finance centre and providing space for light industries as well as other business was also an important factor in determining the need for reclamation.
We're talking about attracting investments to Gibraltar and making Gibraltar commercially viable and competitive. To do that, one has to look at what Gibraltar can provide in terms of services and what type of economy one wants to promote. If we are talking, as the government is intent on doing and made quite clear at the elections, we are talking about making Gibraltar a centre for European community activities, finance centre, tourism, and of course the commercial operation in the yard. To do that, a very important ingredient is land.
During the previous administration's term of office, proposals to build a housing project at Montague were discussed with local developers. The incoming government lost no time in reassessing the situation, and immediate steps were taken to enter into a more ambitious plan. Their new plan included the prospective developers as partners in the Gibraltar Land Reclamation Company structure. This approach was not without its problems.
Initially, the first problem was in understanding government's requirements for land reclamation. Once that was established by the government, we had to compare their proposals, which was what was available at the time, which was at a far reduced scale.
When the new government came in with a sweeping majority, it was difficult to contain the sheer dynamism and energy with which they set about implementing new policies. It was obvious that their plans for reclamation far exceeded anything previously thought possible, and this in turn caused a certain amount of friction with the civil service and the necessary red tape that protects the establishment from overzealous politicians. However, these differences were quickly resolved, and the pace of development did not slow down.
Well, from the very beginning, I was made very much aware by the new government that they were conscious of the red tape that existed in the service and their need to move expeditiously. And in that respect, they advised me that they intended to proceed with these works on a private basis. They wanted private expertise and the benefits of the private sector in expediting the availability of this land resource.
In order to do this, the GSLP had sounded out possible partners before the elections. So no time was lost in looking for backing and expertise, since the groundwork had been done.
We had done a fair amount of research politically before coming into office and had already established contacts and had already a clear view as to the way forward. It's a different thing, obviously, when you come into office and want to implement that policy, and I would agree with you that a fair amount of further studies had to be taken. But because we had already pre-planned, we were in a position to move fairly quickly. And we were able to put further studies into place almost immediately. And we had already researched the market in terms of possible partners. I had already discussed with different potential partners the idea.
When the present government came into power in March, they approached us with a view of renegotiating the terms of our agreement with the previous administration. And their proposals were that they wanted to do the reclamation themselves, because their view was that they wanted to make reclamation an ongoing process, building up a land bank which would then later be marketed to developers and would therefore mean a possible revenue to the government. As we had already done a lot of groundwork on reclamation, the government recruited us to join them in a joint venture company with the Dutch experts, Volker Steven, which are also shareholders, and the government formed the team which would then become the vehicle for them in actually providing the reclamation.
The Gibraltar Land Reclamation Company is made up of 5 partners, who are the Gibraltar Government, Volker Steven, Pegasus, Jabunco and Benpar, a formidable combination of aggressive and hard-working companies who've all played a major part in putting in motion the most revolutionary development plan in the ROC's history.
We had to carry out extensive studies within the area to be reclaimed. We had to carry out a wave regime study which we had to provide with the ministry, which we had to provide to the Ministry of Defence, because they were also concerned of the possible detrimental effects of the reclamation on the wave regime inside the harbour. We also had to take core tests of the Borough area, that is the area where we were proposing to pick up the sand to then deposit in the reclamation area. We had to test the granulometry of the sand to see whether it was sufficient to provide the kind of material that we wanted to deposit.
If those problems seemed formidable, then equally formidable were the various social and political problems in resiting all the amenities. The Calpe Rowing Club was about to lose its sea front, along with all the small craft within Montague Basin. Next door, the Special Boat Squadron were proving difficult to resite.
The government adopted a very business-like approach to this reclamation programme. On the MOD side, the nature of the department is that it is large and that there were technical problems, as I said, to be overcome. And these technical problems had to be staffed back home in the UK. So I can understand certain feelings of frustration that MOD may have been apparently slow in coming back with answers to queries. But nevertheless, the departments back in the UK did act with speed, taking into consideration their priorities and their commitments throughout the rest of the world.
Without wanting to steal the limelight from the present administration, I think the membership of the Calpe Rowing Club can be said to be the pioneers of reclamation, because, well, practically everything that's around us was water quite a number of years ago. Consultation started way back in October '87 with Gibraltar Homes. The initial agreement was that we would get a boathouse built originally by the end of this year, or not this '89, but '88, I think it was, and a swimming pool would be available for us within our premises by the 1st of May 1989. Now, that was as far as the agreements and negotiations were concerned. Unfortunately, neither of these two, shall we say, conditions have materialized through no fault of them. Unforeseen circumstances have prevailed, and the swimming pool is practically ready now, and the boathouse, well, it's not even started. Unfortunately, with the boathouse, I would like to say that we have tried, or Gibraltar Homes have tried to find a space practically everywhere, and it seems almost impossible. We know that we have a site allocated for both rowing clubs at the tip end of the development. We still don't know exactly what form or shape the clubhouses are going to take, but well, this is creating difficulties within the club at the moment, within the membership, because the uncertainty is doing nobody any good. Earlier on I said that the reaction from membership was that of shock. It is still that of shock, because we've lost so much, and still we don't know what we're going to get in return. But obviously I think the general feeling within the membership was that the development itself was too big, too important for Gibraltar, and obviously the fact that the rowing club was here, despite the fact that we've been here for 100 years, could not stop this major housing development for Gibraltar as a whole.
A number of surface water storm drains were about to be blinded with sand, and the Varelbeg saltwater intake had to be moved. All in all, problems that had to be tackled in lengthy negotiations. The coordination for these negotiations was effected through a joint consultative committee, where alternatives were examined in detail until solutions and consensus were found. In the package, the boat squadron were reprovisioned along with the new Naval Ground No. 2, adjacent to Coaling Island, thus releasing the present No. 2 ground for development. Everything was now ready for the fastest and most sophisticated method of reclamation known today. Sand, dredged from the sea and pumped at a rate of 20,000 tons per hour. The Dutch experts Volker Stevin were about to take the stage.
They're one of the best dredging firms in Europe. They are our partners in the company, and they carried out the works under contract through the company of which they are a partner. It may well be, and with the company would consider it, that we may wish to contract elsewhere if it is required to do so. That the proof of the pudding is in the eating. The pricing and the schedule which we wished were met by Volker Steven. We are extremely pleased, and I see no reason why this partnership will not continue to develop, and I think Volker Steven will be in Gibraltar for some time to come.
The contract actually started on the 2nd of October. That means that drawings were prepared. These were cleared by the relevant government departments as being acceptable. Tender documents were drawn up. A price was received from subcontractors. These were accepted and put into place, and work commenced on the 4th of October. Since the 4th of October, we have been constructing the perimeter wall to the area to be reclaimed, and that was in place by the 15th of January.
By Friday the 27th of January, after dredging round the clock for 6 days, the first sandy island was visible 100 metres from the mouth of Montague Basin. The western perimeter of the harbour would never be the same again, and the landmass of Gibraltar would grow in area by nearly 300,000 square metres, representing 1/6 of the total area of the rock. Dredging today is not only the essential civil engineering facility it has always been. It's developed into a highly sophisticated computerized science. The sophistication of new materials and techniques have made it a domain of the dedicated specialist like Volker Steven, one of the world's largest dredging companies, which is part of the diversified Royal Volker Steven Group. Volker Steven Dredging undertakes the most exacting of dredging assignments in the most far-flung parts of the world. It's estimated that the company has probably moved 2 billion cubic meters of soil in its 130-year career, equivalent to what could be carried in a line of dump trucks stretching over 50 times around the world. Its operation in Gibraltar has demanded accuracy and precision, exact time schedules, faultless navigation and reliable modern technology, providing a remarkably fast and high-quality service. In case anyone was wondering just how safe and solid Gibraltar's new land is, this storm surge barrier in the south of the Netherlands was constructed by Doorstar Consortium, in which Volker Steven is the largest partner. The whole structure weighs over 1.5 million tons, took 10 years to design and build, cost 8.5 billion guilders, and is completely built on sand. In Gibraltar, Geopotis 15 has moved almost 2.5 million cubic meters of sand in just under 3 months. In doing so, has carried out almost 350 trips between its dredging area off Europa Point and the harbour. The Geopotis 14 and 15 are the latest in a long line of effective workhorses of the sea and are the most modern dredgers in the world. Geopotis 13 was prudently missed out. In the 60s, the maximum useful removal rate was some 2,000 tons per hour. With Geopotis, these rates have been raised to 5,000 tons per hour. Built in 1985, the Geopotis has a hopper capacity of 8,000 cubic meters, is 132 meters long, has a beam of 24 meters and a draft of 10. Total installed power is 12,400 kilowatts and the machine room is unmanned. Maximum sailing speed is of 15 knots. Currently equipped to dredge at a depth of 32 meters, it's also designed for dredging at 80 meters depth. Dredging is possible in waves of up to 3 meters thanks to the swell compensator. Two 1,640 kilowatts discharge pumps allow for soil to be pumped at a distance of up to 3.5 kilometers from the dredging location, weather and sea conditions permitting. And with its high speed and rapid discharge capability, the Geopotis has been at work all day and night over its 3-month stay in Gibraltar. Sea conditions prevented dredging for only a few days. Refined vessel positioning, navigation and communication equipment are state-of-the-art. Transmitters located at the North Mole, the Lighthouse, Gibraltar Beach Hotel, Moorish Castle, O'Hara's Battery, Mount Alvernia, and at the Rocamar Hotel in Spain allowed Geopotis to be accurately positioned by computer, thus allowing the dredging area to be covered systematically and the sand to be discharged at predetermined positions. This positioning system, currently being made dynamic, was developed in-house by Volker Steven. The powerful bow thrusters, twin propellers and nozzles and twin rudders have given the vessel remarkable maneuverability. The Geopotis 15 can turn on its own length. The dredge heads are of a revolutionary design. At the front are adjustable teeth to optimize the intake of solid matter. Not too much water, but just enough. The positioning system of the vessel locates it above the area to be dredged. The dredging arm is lowered, the heave compensator keeping it always on the bottom at the right pressure. The pumps run, the draghead teeth settings are made, and the draghead takes in just the right combination of soil and water to maximize soil removal while ensuring a mixture that's easily handled by the pumps. As the dredge material flows into the hopper, so the excess water flows back to sea. The separation of water from the dredge material in the hopper is very rapid and saves time by reducing the amount of water remaining undischarged in the hopper. When it comes to discharging, the draghead is lifted and Geopotis 15 makes at top speed to the harbour area. The dredging pumps are connected to a shore-based line and used to pump out the sand. Depending, amongst other things, on the type of soil being dredged, filling the hoppers takes around an hour. On completion of the discharging operation, the vessel returns to its dredging location to commence yet another cycle. Due to the ordnance problem, the dragheads were fitted with intake grills in order to prevent larger explosives to be sucked into the system. The Geopotis 15 has been designed as a fully self-supporting unit. Accommodation and leisure facilities for the crew, like games and mess rooms, ensure that they can relax. A remarkable ship which has definitely left its mark in Gibraltar. The speed at which all this development took place from day one caught the Ministry of Defence a bit off balance at first.
The MOD felt a little bit of trepidation at the outset, but we very quickly adopted an attitude that we should cooperate with the Gibraltar government, because we saw that this was a development program of theirs and they intended to go ahead with it. Indeed, we were surprised at the speed with which Volker Steven proceeded.
I think this caught out a lot of people, not necessarily the MOD, who were, I think, were not quite geared to the demands that we were placing on them locally. And I think once the initial problems that were faced by us wanting to take quick action and they wanting to safeguard their position in some respects, once we got over the initial difficulties, I've had nothing but full support from the Ministry of Defence, and I think the government recognises this, and I think it's with something which we are very grateful for.
We were very impressed with the approach of the department concerned and its officials, for whom we have the very greatest respect. They were very businesslike and they approached matters in a very structured way.
Just how much further support would be needed from the MOD was never fully realised until a problem nobody had foreseen manifested itself in a rather spectacular way. The controlled explosions and subsequent site clearing by the Royal Engineers bomb disposal experts quickly put the ordnance issue to rest, and there was no significant delay to the project.
As I understand it, they were not ordinances which had been dropped as a consequence of war. It appears that where we were dredging and cleared for dredging, and this was cleared with the Ministry of Defence prior, obviously, there must have been a small amount of illegal dumping taking place, and the dredger picked it up, and of course there has been no accidents of any sort. But as far as the future is concerned, you see, there will always be a problem when you dredge about the possibility of picking something that you wouldn't want to pick up. And indeed, even in development, that will always happen. In construction, I mean, if you go it is common when you build in the centre of London, for example, for contractors to come up across a bomb which has been dropped there and hasn't exploded. But so long as necessary safeguards are taken, there should never be any problem. And of course, this has been an experience, and next time they will have to be doubly careful. We've had enormous problems with this reclamation about reprovisioning, bringing services into the areas and so on. But you see, unless we are prepared to face those issues, there's nothing will ever get done. And I think that people are responding to change, so long as they see that the end objective is for the benefit of the community as a whole.
As the new land becomes available for development, the Director of Crown Lands takes on a much wider role as the government's chief surveyor and estate agent, offering a desert as a prime site in a rapidly expanding economy.
The government was producing land, which I would subsequently be involved in disposing, so that we did have to find a way around as to how funds could be channeled to the Land Reclamation Company. And in effect, what the contract arrangements that have been entered into, I'm responsible for making the payments out to the Gibraltar Land Reclamation Company for the works being carried out by them on a monthly basis. And the land or the entirety of the land will be reverting to the government for its disposal.
It is our policy to continue reclamation and producing a land bank, and we will dispose of land in keeping with our economic requirements. But overall, in terms of disposal of land overall and in terms of development overall, it will adhere to our city plan, which we are producing and which we are amending since the last one was produced in 1987. We haven't published the draft, the second draft. We're now in the process of doing so because we have to take on board our own views. It will be there that our economic policies will be determined, so that people know exactly how we're going to go about the future development, at least for the next 5 years. But also we wanted to make it a profitable venture. The idea being, of course, the more profitable it is, the more money we're able to reinvest in further reclamation or for our social services. And indeed, in this particular reclamation, one of the things that we've been able to do is to provide the land free of charge to the developers of West Side 1 and West Side 2, so that we are able to maintain a certain amount of influence and control over the selling prices, so that home ownership on a wider scale than heretofore ever thought of could be implemented.
From the outset, the government were convinced that the investment that they were going into and the sales that investment would yield would be an attractive proposition to lure investors into their scheme. So the whole exercise was very closely thought out. Throughout the early difficulties, the case for reclamation was never weakened, and the government's resolute stand paid off because of the many advantages.
It has also served as an escape valve on the pressure that any government was faced with creating economic development. And the pressure prior to us taking up office has resulted in development in the town area at the expense of, for example, of a certain amount of conservation and historical aspect. And what this has meant is that we can relax to some extent further development in the city area which would damage our image and would damage our city, historically and culturally.
The Gibraltar Land Reclamation Company is already a profitable venture. All future reclamation will be effected on behalf of the government for the purpose of building a land bank. As this land is sold off to developers, the Gibraltar Land Reclamation Company will continue to be profitable, enabling them to reclaim more land. The land allocation in the present reclamation already includes a multi-million-pound investment in the form of the Baltica Finance and Administration Centre. The West Side 1 and 2 housing estates, the reprovisioning of bathing facilities, the building components factory and seafront premises for the rowing clubs. But the list doesn't end there. Negotiations with prospective developers still continue. Although the initial brief was for 185,000 square metres, the present reclamation is now in excess of 290,000. But will it stop there? Already further areas have been identified as feasible for reclamation, and the government has been developing its own ideas on how they wish the programme to continue.
We have got an ongoing reclamation programme. I think that the one that's going to be the most ambitious and certainly the one that's going to be a challenge in itself is the East Side reclamation, because obviously the environment is different. We're faced with the different kind of inclement and less protective waters than we've had in the harbour, so therefore the engineering feat involved there and the technological involvement there is higher. But we are already at conceptual design stage, and the studies and the input already there demonstrate that it is feasible to do exactly what we want to do. And it's really based on developing the whole of that coast into our leisure coast. So we will have the leisure coast on the east side and the new city on this side of Gibraltar. I think that we're now discussing the financing aspects of this, and we're likely to make a decision now once we've finished our financial appraisal early in the new year.
We have to be very careful that the type of system that we use to reclaim the east side is compatible with the type of conditions that we find on that side of the rock. At the moment, this is what we're doing. We're trying to find whether the project is technically viable.
The need to upgrade the airport to a full civilian airport facility has also prompted government to initiate feasibility studies.
The existing airport has served a particular purpose in the past. It was a military airport with limited civilian use. It's now going to be the reverse situation, where we're going to have more civilian use as against military use, and therefore the airport infrastructure as it is now is not capable of meeting the demands that are likely to be placed on it. So therefore we're already in the process of planning improvements in the area, which is going to be a substantial investment. Now, we've had independent reports produced for the government which we are looking at and which have proved to be extremely useful. And I think that we are likely to be making a decision in that respect fairly soon as well.
The Chief Minister, Joe Bossano, has the final word on the development of the reclamation programme as a policy for the future and a legacy for future generations of Gibraltarians. As Gibraltar's expanding economy develops in readiness for the Europe of 1992, he alone stands at the top of the pyramid. If things turn out well, a lot of the credit will probably be shared by many others, but ultimately the responsibility is his.
In a way, I think we can call it the key to the program on which we got elected. We promised very high rates of growth, what we're talking about is increasing the wealth that Gibraltar produces by 50% over the 4 years, and land reclamation was put in as a high priority right at the beginning. This is because, in fact, we're talking all the time about doing two things: maximizing the use of land and maximizing the use of our people. Our people's ability to contribute and produce to the wealth of Gibraltar can be maximized by redeployment. We haven't got a lot of scope for increasing the numbers of Gibraltarians. We grow by 1 a week. But the land we can do something about, and rather than wait for releases of MOD land, we got on with the job. We were very lucky that we had a contact in the election campaign from Holland that responded to our ideas being explained in the campaign and transmitted over Dutch radio, and we were able to create the Land Reclamation Company very early on in the life of the government. And we were ourselves surprised, in fact, by the degree to which they were able to deliver on time, on target, and on the prices that we set out. Obviously, we've had to depend on the understanding and the patience of particularly, I think, the neighbors in the Baalbek estate, who had to put up with a amount of inconvenience in the area. But I think throughout Gibraltar, there is a realization that this potential that we have, which is being unlocked like the land was rising from the sea at an early stage when everybody was amazed to see this little island coming out of our harbour. That unlocking of that potential is not an entirely painless process. I mean, it means accepting change, and it means, if you like, being contaminated by the excitement of these new opportunities that we're developing. We have no choice, you know. The days of depending on MOD spending or on ODA are finished, and we now have to live in the real world. I believe we're being very successful in convincing the outside world that Gibraltar is the best place in which to invest in Europe, and that is being demonstrated by the degree of interest that is being generated by overseas offices, which are now, you know, pushing out the good news about Gibraltar in a number of places of the world, and we intend to have more of those. And therefore, it is taking Gibraltar forward in what is really a new role in Europe and a new relationship with the United Kingdom, which doesn't weaken our historical and traditional links, but makes us more of a partner with UK rather than a subservient entity in the old colonial sense. It is a transition that many other dependent territories have gone through before us. This is a transition that we will not be able to make on our own. We need partners, and fortunately we are getting them. We are able to announce today, for example, the massive investment, which is the largest in our history, in what has been called the new International Administration Center on the reclaimed land by a group led by Baltica. We are very glad to have them here, because not only are they able to mobilize the level of capital that is required for transforming our economy, but I think they will also bring with them the culture of Northern Europe, the efficiency, the way of working that is essential to put Gibraltar on this new platform. I am totally convinced that Gibraltarians can rise to this occasion and absorb this change in their history like they have absorbed so many others in the past, and that we will all share in the future in this wonderful new era that is opening for us.